Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Cohen, the author of An Introduction to the Art and Science of Chinese Tea Ceremony. Today, we're doing a bonus episode on the Tea Technique 2024 research trip to Wuyi. Here to talk about Wuyi is Patrick Benny
Hey, hey.
and Zongzun Li.
Hello.
This is our second annual Tea Technique research trip. How did this trip differ from previous trips?
I'm going to let Zongjun start this one out because I've got a lot of thoughts.
This is our first time, all of us, first time in Wuyi before the trip. Unlike maybe a little bit Yunnan, but unlike Yixing or Chaozhou, we had pretty high expectation to the destination before we arrived. So I guess the sentiment is quite different from the previous trip.
That's a big piece of what I was going to speak to. For Chaozhou, Dansong tea is something that I think we all spoke about last year after the trip that we had not deeply studied previously. We had drank some good Dansong here and there, but it was something that was relatively less well known to us. Wuyi teas, I think we've all been studying for quite a while now. And the level of expectation, both from the teas that we've had, but also from some of the hyperbole and mythology around Wuyi as a place. It's always spoken about as if it were sacred. So I think there was this level of expectation that was very different than the expectations I had going into Yixing or Chaozhou. I think on top of that, after having a great trip last year, going into another trip, I think that also doubled the expectations. I feel like the Yixing and Chaozhou part of our trip last year went perfect.
That was awesome.
Nothing went wrong. We met all the people we wanted to meet. It all hit and exceeded our expectations. It amped up what I expected this year. Previously, we've all, maybe separately, but I've traveled with Jason, you traveled with Zongjun for tea related things. We've done tea trips before, but never back to back consecutive years either. And so I think all those different factors led to maybe an unreasonable expectation of how amazing our experience in Wuyi would go, which was just very different than I think the lower level of expectations I had for last year's trip.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. The mythologizing and the hyperbole and the overall reputation precedes itself. And our trip in many ways was educational and revealing and enlightening. And it certainly was helpful for our understanding of Wuyi tea. But I didn't come away from Wuyi saying, this is my new favorite place. After Chaozhou, all of my tea drinking habits, did a notable shift. One, drinking a lot more Dansong tea. And two, doing a lot more updosing and Chaozhou style brewing and switch some of my kettles and some of my tea setups to Shadiao. I don't really think I changed anything about what I was drinking or doing after this trip.
Same. I did want to ask you guys, really for the audience, what did you see in terms of brewing style, brewing technique, wares? Was there anything, as you mentioned, Jason, there was things that we really noticed and took away in Chaozhou. Was there anything that you noticed when we were Wuyi about brewing style?
Not really. Very generic. And there's nothing noticeably very characteristic that we can point our fingers at and say, oh, wow, this is different than all the other places that we have been to. No, we didn't see any of that.
Too many electric kettles.
Yes.
I will say that the skill of brewing in Wuyi, the people that we were dealing with, the skill of brewing was fine. It wasn't consistently Chaozhou style, but it was closer to Chaozhou than to say the type of either flashy fun time that we see with people who are maybe not drinking quite the same quality of tea that we're drinking, that we're seeking out, or different Yunnan brewing where it could be a lot slower paced. You think it was still closer to Chaozhou, but the wares and the implements were generally not quite to the same caliber. A lot of electric kettles, a lot of medium-sized teapots, but the dosing I think was still quite high.
Yeah, 7 to 8.
That's one of the things that I took away was there's not a single tea that we drank that came from a loose leaf pack. It was always the 8.3 gram packs, and everybody dumps the whole pack every time. That's how we drank. Every single tea we drank was just the 8 gram pack.
7.2 or 8.3. There's two different size packs.
But they always use the whole pack. Although I would say that one thing that they do particularly care about is water. They do really care about water quality. Especially they praise pretty highly on water from Tongmu village.
Yeah, that was a clear takeaway for me too, particularly because I got home and I had one of the teas that Jason and I had gotten on a separate night, Zongjun, when you were a little impaired. When you're
That's a
not
different
feeling well,
story that we're going to talk about.
when you're not feeling well, because Wuyi food did not treat you well. We had gotten some packs of tea from a friend that we had met, very serendipitous meeting. And the tea that I had received, I think it was a Rogueway, tasted so different with my water than it tasted then and there. And in a bad way, not the tea itself, but just my water does not live up to the Tonggu village water that we had at some places, or the water that these people were sourcing locally in Wuyi. Certainly is matched to the tea and has a very, very noticeable impact from what I tasted using my water against it.
I had the same exact experience in Hong Kong. Hong Kong municipal water supply is not really all that recommended for tea. And so I brewed a very light green tea adjacent baozhong and came out healthy and a little oceany. And everyone was like, "It's supposed to taste like that. It's a really marine note." No, I've not gotten these flavors from the tea before. I don't think it's my brewing.
Water is the mother of tea. So I think we all established that our expectations were high and maybe they weren't exactly met, but was there anything in particular that did meet your expectations or were close to it? And was there anything that really stands out to you as you left? We like, wow, that was bad, or that's unfortunate, or made you sad? Anything really linger with you?
For me, the thing that stood out is just how beautiful Wuyi is. It truly is a place of majestic and serene beauty where you walk these relatively small mountains and you see these crags and the kungs and jians, rocks on both sides of you. And it's humid, and yet some of the rocks are cool depending on which way they're facing, and these little microclimates and water everywhere. I do think that there's a reason why we has such a reputation, and it's been preserved in a very contained park setting. Not all is well inside the park, but the fact that the park exists and it's been protected and it is truly as beautiful as the photo show, maybe even more beautiful than the photo show. Well, I guess it depends who the photographer is, because our friend's photos make it look pretty beautiful.
More beautiful than my photos, for sure.
Yeah, indeed.
That's something that met my expectations or exceeded my expectations, is the beauty of the place.
For me, it's the food. Wuyi food is pretty amazing. Although it resides within Fujian province, it's nothing similar to any Fujian food from other regions. It's actually closer to Jiangxi food. A lot of smoky and spicy flavors that you can find, which quite interestingly, you can find great similarities with teas in the region. Smoky notes similar to the smoky Tomu teas, and very oily, kind of pungent notes similar to a lot of the Wuyi tea that you can have in the region. It's quite delicious.
Yeah, I was going to add a comment onto your note about other Fujian food. I spent a lot of time in Zhangzhou and Xiamen area for work, and I dreaded going back to Fujian when I knew we were going to Wuyi. The food is just so plain, very healthy and great for a few days, and then you have it for a week or two and you get real bored. The Wuyi food did not. I think we had a couple dishes, maybe too many times, but aside from that, I did not really get boring.
I don't know. I'll eat sweet lotus seed every day. I will say that despite how good the food was, I don't think it was a great match for Yangcha. The food and the tea were very incongruous.
Oh, they are both very pungent. They taste similar to each other, but it probably should not be tasted together.
Both things suit the palate of the people. I certainly wouldn't pair the spicy smoked duck with a delicate chilan.
Yeah.
Even a spicy smoked duck with a spicy cinnamon rogueware, I don't think they go together. That
1
was,
+ 1 = 0.
yeah, something about Chaozhou. All of the Dansong highly polyphenolic teas just paired with the food perfectly. And even the low to mid-grade teas served in a restaurant, metal teapot in a restaurant, chugging that down while eating your chow fun and other Chaozhou food, it went perfectly.
Oh, making me hungry.
It just turns out we're all Chaozhou bros. That's what we learned when we went to Wuyi. We're all Chaozhou
Yeah.
bros. I do want to
Although
hear,
life-
what stuck with you guys in a negative way. What was some of the impressions that you were less happy to confront your bias or reality on Wuyi?
I think we have a lot of things to share. I think my major disappointment is how commercialized and over-fertilized, over-utilized Wuyi is in terms of garden management. It's nothing similar to the old arbor garden in Chaozhou or tea mountains, tea forests in Yunnan. It's really terrace tea, tidy cha everywhere, extended all the way into the inner park. And these bushes are clearly so hyper fertilized that they are sprouting shoots in the middle of summer. and they are very heavily pesticized because all the fertilizers would attract a lot of these insects. That's very disappointed, but understandable because for what we have heard, these gardens are not allowed to plant even a single more bushes outside of their boundaries. There are literally people, garden supervisors or park supervisors patrolling in the regions, literally tearing down excess bushes coming out from the garden. It's very heavily regulated. If you cannot expand your growing region, the only way is to increase your production within the region. So that's very sad.
I totally agree with what Zongzun said. The other thing that I found to be very off-putting is the over-reliance and the over-focus on Rogueway and Shuixian. I like Rogueway and Shuixian, some of the best yanchas that I've had in Rogueway or Shuixian, but neither are part of the original Sidaminsong, the original 4 great cultivars of Wuyi, and they have been so overplanted to the point where nearly all teas that you can find commonly from Wuyi are those 2 cultivars, and everything else is considered small cultivar, minority cultivar. These 2 cultivars that aren't even originally from Wuyi that do produce good tea, but they're selected because they're easy to grow, they're fast growing, they're earlier harvest, they can easily be blended out between regions, and you really lose a lot of the original special flavors and the variety of flavors that made Wuyi famous.
Yeah, I have to agree with both of you. I think for me, seeing some of the heavy fertilizer use was definitely sad. Seeing just how commercial some of these gardens are was definitely a disappointment to me. Honestly, the biggest disappointment, though, was walking about an hour plus to get to the entrance of the trailhead for the mother bushes for Dahongpao. So Jason and I, on our last day, we were feeling very brave, and we were like, we are going to go see these Dahongpao mother trees no matter what. During this trip, it basically flooded in the park almost every single day that we were there. So the park was closed. And so we figured, you know what, if cars can't get into the park, we will walk into the park, brave the elements because it was very wet, and we are going to see these mother trees. And as it happens, after our sweaty hour-and-a-half walk into and up the hill into the park, we make it to the Dahongpao mother tree trailhead. And there is a guard there, and they do not let us pass. And we did not feel like getting deported. So we listened to them and turned back around. But that was probably the saddest experience of the trip.
So I don't know if I rank it quite as the saddest, but that was quite disappointing. Although we did run up the other side of the mountain that looks over the Dahongpao Valley and saw some more trees.
We saw a lot of trees. We just didn't see those trees.
Yeah, weather was definitely a letdown this time. Maybe next time we should go on a different date.
Part of lessons learned is certainly don't go to Wuyi in June. We will be visiting at a different time of year.
Yeah.
Doubling down on that, is there a next time? What do we plan to do next time we want to go to Wuyi? Because I don't think we're giving up, right?
No, we're not giving up. I don't think any of the next set of books will be on Wuyi tea. I think it'll be either on Pu'er or Chaozhou Gongfu in some unknown order. But I would like to, at some point in the future, write a book on Wuyi. But I think that we just need to go back, tag on a few days in Wuyi after the ends of a few different trips, and really double down on developing the relationships that we currently have and additional relationships, and spending time in the further reaches of the park where perhaps we can catch a better feeling of more natural growing areas and older trees.
I definitely agree. Because it's not like we didn't see some of these hidden and secluded growing areas with nice, natural, beautiful trees. We did have the opportunity to be guided by a teammaker friend to some of these areas, and seeing some of those more natural, harder to reach areas definitely kept the spark alive. And I think seeing some of the areas that disappointed us after was a good thing, because the fire and passion, I think, for Wuyi has been still ignited. Just a matter of finding the right context to help us get to that next level and next spot to make sure that we're not just Chaozhou bros for life, but we come back to being Wuyi bros.
Chaozhou and Yunnan for life. One question that I have is, how does this recontextualize prior experiences that you've had? Since we've had so many experiences with Wuyi tea outside of Wuyi, where it's being presented to us as the height of tea culture. And we've had some teas that we thought were phenomenal, S tier, preference score 7 out of 7. And now looking back, how does this recontextualize that? One that stands out in my mind is our first time learning about and tasting nyocha, cow tea, drink cow meat eat cow, all of the slang sayings for Niu Lan Kong Ro Gui. How does this experience recontextualize that?
So I think that must have been 1 year before Zongzun joined. I think it was my last year in the Institute. That was like the pinnacle of tea experience for me for a very long time. I graduated after that event that we had, and I did not have a similar caliber tea experience for a very long time. This was days of us learning about yancha. We had many experiences of high quality yancha leading up to having this new rocha. And I think we lectured about this tea. We learned from a shared teacher about this tea probably an hour and a half before drinking it. So there was quite a lot of setup, pomp, and circumstance that went into tasting this tea. But when we had the tea at that time, it was still, as you said, mind blowing, 100 out of 100. It was the best tea that I had to date in my life at that point. So it's hard then going to New Lankung and seeing the state of most of the bushes and understanding that the tea that we had is also the tea that we saw there. I think it reveals that there's probably more to New Lankung than what meets the eye when you're walking down the path, right? I'm sure that there are some small kung or jian that are adjacent to New Lankung that form this liminal border between the two. And of course, you're going to call it Neuro because you'll probably get more money, right? But there probably is still these gems within that area, that terroir, that go against what we had seen while we were there and might live up to the experience that we had back in 2014 when we first tasted this tea. But I don't know. I think being there and then also having the opportunity to go to a pretty famous yancha studio that also sources Neurocha and things like that, it also just makes me think the tea that we had, would I ever pay for an experience like that personally? And the answer is probably no, because I'm assuming that that tea that we had back in 2014 must have been so expensive, just thinking about the quality that it was and seeing some of the price points we saw last month when we were in Wuyi. I think maybe it's the biggest contextualizer for me after our experience is knowing and tasting Wuyi Yancha, always seeing it as the pinnacle prior to being in Wuyi, and then being in Wuyi and seeing some of the price tags that are associated with it. It's saying that DRC is some of the best wine in the world or Lafite Rothschild or something like that. And then also going, oh yeah, and it also costs this much money. Okay, no duh, it's pretty good. It's inaccessible and super expensive. So maybe that reaffirmed that bias or thought that I had about Wuyi. But interested in your guys' thoughts as well.
You weren't there for that Zongzun, so did you have a formative experience with Wuyi tea? I think you did go through the same thing where Wuyi tea was presented to you as the pinnacle.
Yeah, it's a weird shift of my mentality towards viewing this category of tea. To some extent, I almost wanted to perceive like we can probably end up drinking better Wuyi tea outside of Wuyi because all of these tea contexts that we have outside Wuyi in different places act as a filter to help us get better access to teas that are just really hard to find inside Wuyi. So for our personal experience in Wuyi, I think we are getting such a crude experience that people probably spend decades trying to cultivate relationship and end up having access to certain tea. And we end up drinking those tea with them and end up developing such expectation towards the region. So I think there's really a disparity between reality and our expectation and the formative experience that we had that led to those expectations.
Just before Jason and I went to Wuyi, we had a Wuyi tasting in Taiwan with a contact of ours. And we had the best tea that I had that entire trip. It was a Wuyi Yancha, a slightly obscure cultivar, and it was mind-blowing. And Jason bought some, so he still has it. Those were the best teas, some of the best teas that we had the whole trip, including being in Wuyi.
I don't disagree with that. I do want to push back and say, how is that any different than pu'er or really any other tea, right? We've had excellent pu'er tea in Taiwan or in our friends' tea houses in Shanghai. There's always an art of curation. There's always the ability to purchase through merchant who we trust, who have good taste and whose taste we align with. I don't know, is that unique to Wuyi in some ways, Zongzun, to your point? Or is this just that we think that our merchant friends currently can source better tea from Wuyi than we can? Because we just went to Yunnan and now we have firsthand contacts and amazing sources. For me, I don't know, I probably fell out in 2010, 2011 with most of my Yunnan contacts for WeChat. So is this just a function of us or that we work differently than these other places?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Maybe a little bit of both. But just by seeing the price tag that we had in Wuyi and how it compares to other teas that we drank elsewhere, it really doesn't make sense. You don't quite see that in other regions. Like these astronomical prices. Like usually the price are lower inside the region than elsewhere, like Yunnan or Chaozhou, but it's higher in Wuyi.
I paid less for that tea, that amazing tea, that tea I gave a PQ7, 7 out of 7 in Taiwan than we paid for any of the tea that we bought in Wuyi.
Yeah. Wuyi is almost a showroom on its own. They have people want to purchase more expensive tea, but it's usually not the case in other places.
Yeah, I think Wuyi has its own Jianghu, and I think we see it in Yunnan. We saw it in Chaozhou. It's just a little different in Wuyi. I think certainly we still do need to learn the ropes, and maybe we've learned the ropes in some of the other places. But I think, Jason, you wrote it very well in the blog post that you had shared. We need to just keep showing up. We need to keep building contacts. And maybe we need to just try doing things a little differently than we've done in other areas if we want to be able to source tea in the same way that we feel like we've been able to in other areas. I don't think Wuyi's different. Big difference. I think there might just be some small nuances that we need to learn.
Price is a big difference. Price of entry.
Yes, that's true. The price tag to start is high.
Every extra gram of fertilizers into the earth, you have another Mercedes S-Class popping out.
We saw cars very unlike what I saw in Chaozhou. Maybe you guys had a different experience in Yunnan, but man, some of the cars that I saw while we were in Wuyi, some of the cars we got to take a ride in with the studio that we had visited, those were very nice vans.
The Maybach ownership per person is definitely higher in Wuyi than other.
Yeah.
One thing that I do think we need to discuss is drinking Maocha and Bingcha also.
Let's start with Bingcha because Bingcha was cool. Bingcha is basically...
That was at least safe.
Bingcha was safe, yeah. Bingcha was basically tea that was picked, withered, slightly rolled and shotchinged, and then thrown in a freezer. So it's basically like super fresh, undried Maocha. It's pretty Maocha, right? It hasn't dried. And they basically take it out of the freezer and brew it up. And the flavor, what's really like eating raw tea leaves. Like it gives you a lot of these green notes that maybe you do find in like a Yunnan Maocha, but beyond that, there's this oiliness and spiciness that you only find, I think, from fresh, unprocessed tea leaves. Totally unique, and it's not something that I think you can get if you're not in an immediate tea region because it's not going to stay good. It's a really cool experience. How did you guys feel about it?
One of our friends mentioned that she had some Bingcha shipped through one of the shipping service and they didn't end up putting enough ice, but the Bingcha arrived rotting and stinky.
It's just heicha. It's fine.
It's a
Very
different kind of hay.
That's like a little anaerobic shopor.
It's the chodofu kind of hay.
You've heard of yellow mold? This is black mold tea. Okay.
So
what about Maocha? Jason, I'm going to tee you up, and I think we want to hear Zongzun's side of the story on Maocha.
Yes, Zongzun seemed to have suffered the effects worse than we did. We were invited to a tasting. Let's say we went in skeptical and we left with all skepticism removed.
We left permanently damaged.
We left knowing that our original skepticism was well placed. She queues up for what she calls Maocha, which is the unroasted yancha, but lightly processed unroasted yancha. We're still not 100% sure what state this tea was in, but we know it had no roast at all.
But it's dry. It is dry.
It was dried. It may have only been withered and shaped and then dried because it didn't go through any roast, and we're not sure what extent of rolling it went through. It was pretty green. It didn't have a lot of oxidative note, and the leaves hadn't been very reddened. It just had some chips around the edges that were red. But she says, taste these teas and then put them into quality order. So we taste these 4 teas. None of them are very good. Me, Pat, and Zongzun all place the teas in exactly the same order. And then she says, okay, taste again. We're like, do we have to?
Because these were not enjoyable to taste.
These are not enjoyable teas.
Everyone who's had Maocha that they've bought online, that's like finished proper Maocha. This is not the same thing. It's painful to taste.
Yeah, it hurts your palate. It's coarse. And I'll circle back on why we even agreed to do this in a moment. But she says, taste again, I'll brew again. And we're like, do we have to? Like all three of us put it in the same order. Like, we're pretty convinced. She's like, no, 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 your order is wrong. And we're like, oh, okay, we'll taste again. So we taste again. We're all like, no, our order is pretty accurate unless we don't understand what we're looking for. She's like, no, you guys don't understand. You have to taste all of this other tea. Let's taste one more time and we'll show you the proper order. So we do it again. Our order in our minds doesn't change. She puts it in the reverse order to what we did. She said, this one that you thought was worse, this is actually best. And at that point, we're all sweating buckets, both from the heat, but also from the ill effects of this tea. You get that narrowing and tunnel vision and tight jaw that you get from tea that likely has pesticides still on it.
Tightened throat, a knot in your stomach, you're clenching your cheeks because you're not feeling good.
And at this point, Pat and I look at each other. We're like calling a safety halt. We're like, no, we're not drinking any more of this. And Zongzun somehow got the brunt of this.
I was out, man. I was blacked out that night. Really out and fever. That was terrible. We had Maocha in Chaozhou, and it's nothing similar to that.
Why don't you tell that part of the story, Zongzun? Because that's why we agreed to do this Maocha tasting. Because in Chaozhou, as we were with the tea producers, we tasted Maocha.
Yes, we did. And the lesson that we learned from that experience is that you're not really supposed to be looking for flavors that you would find or you would rate as higher perceived quality when you're drinking the finished product. So you'll be looking for different stuff. So that was all fun and interesting. When our tea brands offered to do this experience, we were like, oh yeah, let's go ahead and really learn something about Wuyi Yancha from a different angle. And that was the reason why we agreed to do this, but it seems to be a mistake. Apparently, a lot of these heat treatments from roasting would degrade pesticides or fertilizer that still remains on the surface of the leaves. That's why you're not really supposed to drink matcha. But,
It was the beginning of the end.
Only learned that after the whole experience.
We were spitting for the most part too. Like we really were not consuming a lot of it. We were dumping most of our cup. But I think the other thing that was really subpar about that experience was we didn't really understand what we were looking for, which was evident when we were completely wrong. But Zongzun, you were at that point being destroyed by Maocha, but you attempted to translate a little bit of what they were telling us. And it seemed like it was impossible because it was just magic-y. It was not science, right?
Really just Jabberwocky's gobbledygook abstract theory about, still to this day, I cannot really translate what's the difference between show and tell. Somehow they refer to the better tea or the better matcha as being a ko, which literally can be translated as thorough or penetrated. What exactly is that? It's still a mystery. And I don't think they even know how to articulate what ko is in Chinese to me. They just keep pointing at that tea and tell me that, okay, that's to. What to?
What is to? What we had understood, we were looking at different levels of correct water purging, right? I think that's where we thought our heads were at. And so we all had picked the worst sample as being the one that was cloudy, obscured flavor, felt like you weren't getting a lot of extraction because there was probably still a lot of water in the leaf. And that was the most thorough sample. That was the toe sample. So we were completely wrong. Great experience to show us who to not source tea from.
Or what poor understanding of science processing does to you. I guess part of the problem is she was a merchant who oversees other people producing tea for her. But we did not come away impressed with her finished tea. We certainly didn't come away impressed with her matcha.
Also the case for a lot of other tea production regions, but everyone in Wuyi has their own theory about shuilu, about water path, about how to purge the water, and what exactly is the mechanism of water purging. Which in this matcha tasting case, the theory was that all of the water gets out from the tea leaf around the edge of the leaf, because all the holes of the leaves are centered on the edge. That was the theory. Anyone with the background of Biology 101 would disagree with it.
There's exclusively stomata on the edges of the leaf. That's it.
Yeah.
This is obviously a camphor plant, nighttime stomata only. Tea is not a camphor plant. I'm joking.
Maybe it's that specific cultivar.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah, speciation definitely changes your photorespiration.
Hyper-engineered by the Wuyi Tea Institute.
They've got the money for it. They've got the money for it.
Is there anything positive that we can end on? Is there anything that for people who are purchasing teas, buying teas, for readers, listeners, Is there anything that we can leave them with where they say, now I have a better understanding of Wuyi, other than that Jason Patton Zongzun think it's difficult to buy yancha in Wuyi? Other than that, it's a more complicated place than the magical reputation that perceived. What can we give to readers and listeners to take away from?
Good Wuyi tea or fantastic Wuyi tea definitely exists. We have had it, and it's not something that came out of thin air or other places. I would just say that if you do enjoy your Wuyi tea, if you have been buying good Wuyi tea from your contact, keep doing so. There's really no need of going into Wuyi and try to find better contact unless you have been specifically recommended.
Unless you have plans to become a merchant. There is good Wuyi tea. There's fantastic Wuyi tea. It comes at a price point. So if you want to experience better Wuyi tea and you enjoy the vendors you're buying from, try buying their more expensive Wuyi tea and see if that's worth it for you. Because I think we've all had great Wuyi teas at different price levels, but it does seem that the best Wuyi teas have an entry price that's a little rich for most people. So I would try spending a little more on some small samples to see if that gives you any sense of a better quality of product or more enjoyment from your tea. I would also say, like, if you do like your vendors, they're doing probably a great job for you then, because sourcing tea is definitely a skill. It's an art. I do think there's a lot of Western vendors who are doing a great job of it. It is its own beast. I think maybe we still have a lot more to learn about it, and there's a lot more that we will share in the future, but I don't know that we're there yet. Jason, what do you want to share with our listeners and readers?
I guess going back to brewing, one thing that we did not see, which I was a little surprised at, is in Wuyi, no one crushes and packs. You're using a lot of tea, but their teapots were not tiny.
Did we even see anyone use a teapot?
Yeah, on our last night, our new friend, she used a Yixing.
Okay. So beyond that, we had Gaiwans exclusively for the 5 days that we were at Wuyi.
I think that's right. Not a single person crushes Wuyi tea in Wuyi. That was interesting because many times we saw Wuyi done with what we were told, what was claimed to be or called Chouzhou Gongfu, where you crush and then pack the teapot. And obviously in Chouzhou, they're drinking dancong, and in Wuyi, they're not crushing and packing.
Thank you, Taiwan.
So we're gonna need to write a book about this. I was in page
Number 3.
Yeah, it's going to be a short one.
This will be a short one.
800 pages later.
It's a complete anthology of the history of crushing and packing teapots, teacher by teacher, generation by generation.
I look forward to editing it.
This has been another edition of Tea Technique Editorial Conversations. Thank you again for joining us, and look forward to the next podcast in our regularly scheduled program.